Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have an amazing webcast today, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on demand. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our esteemed speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before the end of today's webinar. Also, at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our four lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is solving Kubernetes security issues and challenges with Red Hat OpenShift and Sysdig. Our speakers today are Dave Maurer, who is a global solutions architect at Red Hat. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Doing great, Charlene, thanks.
Good. And Eric Carter, who is Director of Product Marketing at Sysdig. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining me today.
Hey there, glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Dave, I know you are going to be kicking off the conversation, so I'm going to put myself on mute, but before I do and take myself off camera, I do want to let the audience know that we have 3 polling questions during today's presentation as well. So hopefully we can get everybody engaged with those. But with that, I will let you get right to it.
Thank you, Charlene. Yeah, and so we'll start with an agenda. And the good news is that I won't be talking that long. We'll get to the start of the show with Eric, but I'll dive into some of the things that Red Hat has been doing around DevSecOps, and that definitely involves OpenShift. And so we'll look at a handful of features, and then I'll pass it over to Eric, who will give you the Sysdig point of view, security dynamics in the world of DevOps, some of the challenges around Kubernetes, containers, and we'll talk about some customers that solve these critical security challenges. So the next slide is a polling question, and we'll bring, oh good, it's already up.
It's already up. I was waiting for you. The polling question should be on your screen. The question is, how familiar are you with Red Hat's security features? You can choose from not familiar, who is Red Hat? Trainee, I use Red Hat, but we have people for security. Novice, first thing I do is turn off SE Linux. Proficient, OpenShift is securing my containers as we speak. Or expert, I am a Red Hat certified specialist in security. Hopefully, maybe we get a lot of experts on today's presentation. So, all right, we'll give you guys about 15 more seconds or so to make your selection. While the audience is making its selection, just a quick reminder that if you have a question for either Dave or Eric at any time during the presentation, you do not have to wait for the question and answer period to submit your question. So just keep that in mind. We don't want to have a deluge of questions there at the question and answer period. We'd like to see a steady flow. All right, with that, let's go ahead and close out today's poll, and I will, the first of 3, and I'll go ahead and show everybody the answers. All right, there are the results. Looks like the majority of folks are trainees. What do you guys, is that helping you guys?
That does, and I know you were hoping for more experts, but to be honest, Charlene, not me, because I don't want experts to be able to know what I'm telling is wrong or right. So.
Okay, well, fair enough.
But no, this is good. This is good. And a lot of us are trainees, right? I think there's a lot of things around OpenShift and security that are new. It keeps changing a lot. It's all based on Kubernetes, and we'll talk about that more. So I think for the next 20 or 10 minutes for me, and then to the rest of the webinar with Eric, I think this will be a good learning experience for everybody.
I am laughing, Dave, at the novice. First thing I do is turn off SE Linux. And by the way, we have ways to detect that you've done that,
yes,
and to be able to, show you or show others around you that you've done that. And maybe that's not the right idea or right thing to do. But anyway, we'll get into that in a little bit.
All right. Well, I'll hide the results. Let you guys get into your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you.
Alrighty, so the next slide is the title slide of my section, and you may be thinking, well, how does Red Hat solve DevSecOps? I think it's three parts. There's as being a platform provider for our customers, I think Red Hat is uniquely positioned to see the entire life cycle. We also have Red Hat's main strategy is open hybrid cloud. So we've got a lot of expertise in containers, Kubernetes, and sort of the multi-cloud space. And then another key part of it, which is kind of on the slide here, is that Red Hat's partner ecosystem. They bring complementary solutions on top of our platform that extend and enhance our Red Hat portfolio. And so we've been engaged internally at Red Hat across many different teams to position ourselves and come up with a vision around DevSecOps. So in the next slide, here's the latest draft. And you can see that partners and Red Hat technologies have equal weight, or have an equal part in this vision. As I mentioned, our security partners do extend and enhance our functionality, are the ones that have certified containers and operators with us. The key thing to remember, though, with all DevOps changes, practices, if you're getting involved in DevOps, is culture, right? Culture is the first and most important thing that you need to think about when you're moving from sort of a legacy process over to DevOps. It's especially if you want to make sure that you're adding security into DevOps and that you're covered in every area and that security is not slowing you down. And of course, Red Hat and our partners have the expertise and services that can get you through that culture part. Now with this vision, we're actually able to sort of manifest this in a couple practical ways. One is on the next slide, which is an example of how our teams have put together a DevSecOps solution that we can provide to customers. And it looks kind of simple, right? That's the whole point. It's easily consumable. You can understand where things fit, but it took some time and effort to build this view. From a Red Hat perspective, we have the view of the life cycle, the different tools that are involved within DevOps and DevSecOps, the context. We've got the platform. We then worked with a bunch of our security partners like Sysdig and the industry analysis to come up with security categories. So you see those categories on the bottom left-hand side, as well as what we call security methods. There's several methods in each category. We were able to identify about 32 different security methods, and that gave us a framework that we can then take to our partners and start to build out these joint solutions that you see here with Sysdig. So we're mapping Sysdig alongside of Red Hat's capabilities. And again, this will serve as a guide to our customers to start them down that DevSecOps journey. It's a great conversational guide as well, as customers are looking at their different integration points and saying, hey, do I have compliance built into my build automation? If not, maybe I should look at Sysdig, right? One thing to notice here is that this is all heavily built on OpenShift. So in the next slide, I want to talk about OpenShift's value. And some of you may have seen this flavor of this slide before. I've sort of changed it to be a little bit more security focused. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the security features here. But the first thing to note with this diagram is that OpenShift is certified Kubernetes. Sometimes people ask that and forget that, but it is a certified Kubernetes deployment. Now, if you think about installing, downloading Kubernetes, it's pretty easy. But if you want to get it ready for an enterprise deployment, that's a lot more difficult. And the slower you roll out Kubernetes in your enterprise, the least amount of adoption you're going to have. So why not let Red Hat and our partners do the tough work for you and give you a complete solution, complete Kubernetes solution that'll get you towards DevSecOps. So looking at some of the security features, you can see at the top there, multi-cluster management. We'll talk about this in a slide coming up around policy control and compliance. If I move my way down, you see I've highlighted service mesh. That has some security features, CI/CD pipelines. You might be wondering, CI/CD pipelines, that's not a security feature. It's not, you're right, but it's a very important integration for security scans, for image scannings, things like that. There's logging. We have IDE plugins that provide things like dependency analytics for security vulnerabilities. I'm going to just jump over the security features right now and mention the cluster services, monitoring, registry. The Quay registry, it was built with security in mind. It's optimal for DevSecOps. There's a lot of networking features, networking policy features around security. And then, of course, all of this is built on top of Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Red Hat and RHEL Core OS. And the 4 main security features to think about with those operating systems are SE Linux, which we've talked about, right? Should keep SE Linux on, set to enforce 1. Namespaces, secure computing mode, which is seccomp, and C groups. Those are definitely features to take a look at. If I jump back to the security features box there, I just want to mention that the container runtime, which is CRI-O has replaced the Docker runtime. CRI-O has a very small footprint. It reduces that attack vector because it's not one big fat daemon. There's some cluster and image hardening features. One of them we'll talk about around compliance in a couple of slides. Another key thing to note about Red Hat in general is the support that we provide to our customers. That's a huge value add, which, for example, if a new vulnerability is published on Kubernetes, we will actually backport versions of Kubernetes and fix those vulnerabilities that our customers have running. So they won't have to be forced to move to a new version. So it's a key feature our customers really value. You also see there the identity and access management, role-based access control, and of course our security ecosystem, security ISVs like Sysdig. Now, I could talk about these security features for the rest of the webinar. I don't think Eric would appreciate that. So I just wanted to pick out a couple of features over the next slides, and then I'll hand it over to Eric. So the first one is GitOps on OpenShift. Now, you may all have heard that back in August, Red Hat and Intuit, who started Argo CD, we announced a collaboration together. So Red Hat has increased our investment on Argo CD and GitOps significantly. And for the developers in the room, if you're familiar with Git and pull requests, those concepts and those principles are pretty much the same thing in GitOps, where you're, instead of managing an application, you're managing infrastructure, managing configuration on that infrastructure with Git. So Git, the repository, is the single source of truth. It will contain the desired state of the cluster, and it can also track and has visibility into the actual state. So if there's any deviations, an admin can go in and manually take steps or build automation around those to get those in sync. Now, Red Hat will be productizing Argo CD as the core engine behind OpenShift GitOps. And you may have heard of technologies like OpenShift pipelines and OpenShift builds and now GitOps. So how do you combine those technologies? How do you, configure those to run effective GitOps, right? We're telling you that it's complementary. Well, one of the key tools is the GitOps application manager, that CLI there in the second sub-bullet. GitOps application manager will be able to help teams to bootstrap a GitOps process using those technologies in a way that Red Hat would recommend. So we're adding some improvements to the GitOps application manager, and as well as the environments view in the dev console, so you'll be able to get a little bit more details and visibility into the deployments and the history of those deployments as well. And again, this is going to be tech preview in Q1. This is OpenShift GitOps, and then look forward to GA sometime in the middle of next year. All right, so that's GitOps. The next slide is a little bit around compliance. It's a lot about compliance. Red Hat has just done a ton of work with compliance, everything from NIST checklists to FSMA deployments, PCI requirements. All of these are readily available online. But I wanted to focus on the work that Red Hat has done with the Center for Internet Security in this document that you're seeing a preview of. This is for a CIS benchmark for OpenShift 4. Now, there is a Kubernetes CIS benchmark. I think the latest one is for 1.6 or 1.16. And you could definitely use that on OpenShift 4, but this one has specific commands and uses the OpenShift command line OC as the audit commands. So for example, at the bottom there, you can see that recommendation where we're trying to ensure that the API server, the permissions, the pod specification file permissions are set to 644. These commands, all these commands have been vetted by Red Hatters, and we're providing guidance in the actual audit commands for you to run to ensure you meet those recommendations. Now, of course, these are a lot of commands. Once you see the spreadsheet, it's, all those line items on the top right have all their own tabs. There's a lot of commands. You don't want to be running these manually and monitoring these manually. You want to automate these and monitor these checks, and that's exactly what Sysdig does in one of their features as well. So check out what they do there as well. Now, this document is still in a CSI. Well, I've been watching a lot of TV. CIS inspired stage. We're hoping that it's going to be published on the CIS website shortly. Okay. The next feature in the next slide is Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management for Kubernetes. So imagine if you have multiple clusters. Let's say one's on-prem, you have some in a cloud, you might have, even Kubernetes. So Advanced Cluster Management for Kubernetes, or we call it RACM, helps to manage those fleet of clusters. And there's 3 pillars of functionality that RACM has. So you can see there on the left-hand side, multi-cluster lifecycle management, which is basically a CRUD for clusters. That's what I like to call it, where you can create, update, view, delete clusters across your fleet and across your clouds. Then you've got advanced application lifecycle management. This gives you the ability to easily deploy applications at scale. You can visualize those applications. You see a little bit of a preview down at the bottom screenshot there. And then there's policy-driven governance, risk, and compliance. So this gives you the ability to centrally, from your RACM console, set and enforce policies for your fleet. You can set compliance, like we just talked about, the CIS compliance policies, audit checks, but it's not just compliance. You could also enforce that deployments of applications are across your fleet of clusters. And guess what? Sysdig has some functionality there as well, where you can ensure that either Falco or Sysdig Secure is deployed in each one of your clusters, securing your Kubernetes or your OpenShift cluster. And they were the first one to integrate with RACM, so we're very excited about that integration. All right. Oh, the other thing to mention is that we talked about GitOps earlier. One of the things we're going to enhance with RACM is to further align this capability with Argo CD. Argo CD is going to be the core GitOps engine here. And this will obviously expand the use cases of GitOps to cluster provisioning across your fleet of clusters. All right. So the last slide I wanted to present is something very excited about. It's a new certification that Red Hat is creating. You may have are familiar with our container certification and our operator certification as well. This is owned by the same team and it goes along the same lines, but it is a collaboration with our security ISV partners like Sysdig, who have vulnerability scanning capabilities for containers. The main goal of this certification is really to limit the confusion, the frustration of our customers when they see a report from one of our great vendors like Sysdig, and then they look on the Red Hat site and there are many discrepancies. So what we've done over the last 4 or 5 months is we've entered into a pilot phase with this certification. Sysdig has been part of it since day one. And we're ending the pilot here at the end of this year, and we're gonna launch it here in early January, or in the early part of 2021. And what we have done is, it is definitely a collaboration piece. So we've learned a lot from our partners and they've learned from us, but there are certain requirements for the certification that we have provided to our partners. And one of them is to consume Red Hat's relatively new Oval feed, version 2, as well as use Red Hat's 4-point scale severity rating in our partner's UI, so that when you see the report or you look on Sysdig's UI, you'll see what Sysdig has to say about the vulnerability or the component and what Red Hat does as well. So this, we think, will definitely minimize discrepancies and lessen the confusion as well, bringing that information right into your hands, so you don't have to go searching for it. So we're very excited about this certification, and look forward, to seeing how this plays out next year. All right, I think that's it for me. I will pass it on over to Eric.
All right, Dave, thank you. I appreciate the time you put into this, and we've done a few of these together this year, and it's been good. I think there's a good back and forth and a good way to present exactly what you're talking about, how Red Hat helps secure just from a full stack perspective, how Sysdig comes into play, and the kind of things that we can do to augment and complement what's already there from Red Hat and with OpenShift. So let me kick in. I just wanted to talk real quickly about, really it harkens back to, Dave, what you said about culture, right? So one of the things that we have definitely witnessed across our customers is that there's this convergence of responsibility for security. And all I mean by that is it's almost like no matter what role you're in, you now have sort of a mandate or a hand in making sure that things are secure by default. And so we're seeing security being embedded more and more into DevOps, thus DevSecOps, and it really comes across as one, a set of tools that can help us get there, right? Regardless of my role, platform owner, I'm a developer, I'm some sort of operations person, security person, right? We want to be able to kind of work together, and tools like Sysdig are helping with that. It's skills, right? I need to know what matters. And when you come into containers in Kubernetes, some of the what matters shifts compared to a traditional environment. And then of course, culturally, right? Culturally, working across sort of boundaries in many cases. And I think that what we're finding is that even though my title might be an operations person, I'm definitely getting cross-skilled at many things security, and we'll go through some of what those things are and how that kind of fits into sort of the life cycle of OpenShift, of containers, of Kubernetes. Having said that, let's figure out where you are, I think, in our next polling question. So Charlene, if you can help us with that.
Yep, should be up on your screen now. The poll question is, which team owns the container/Kubernetes security initiative at your company? You can select from DevOps team, cloud security team, or shared between DevOps and cloud security. Go ahead and make your choice. And while we are waiting for everybody to do that, another quick reminder that today's event is being recorded. So if you want to watch the webinar again, or if you miss any part of it, you'll have the opportunity to catch it on demand. We will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand following today's webinar. So got that to look forward to. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close out the polling question here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll get polling closed, and let's share the results now. Oh, this is interesting. It's almost evenly spaced. What do you guys think of these responses?
Yeah, it is interesting how almost even it is, right? Who owns it? Like the DevOps team, 31%, that kind of speaks to what I was talking about, which is more and more folks that might have considered themselves more development or operations now are security people as well. Having said that, as the growth of cloud native kind of continues, without a doubt, like people who used to have a role that was very security titled are now getting engaged and become part of this cloud security team, right? And then of course, as we've been talking about, the DevOps and cloud security folks are kind of hand in hand, defining requirements, what matters, what kind of tooling do we need, how do we choose that, how do we implement it, how do we prove what we've done, right? So it's good.
Yeah, okay. I'll go ahead and hide the results and let you get back to it.
All right. Let me pop back over here. All right, so here's one of the things, and we talked to Red Hat about this a lot. We talked to customers about it a lot. That there are consequences to security coming in late, but why might it happen? And oftentimes, especially as many of us are, and speaking as a customer or as a user, start kicking into this world of containers, Kubernetes, we're sort of getting started. We're figuring things out. It's I would say a bit of a a scrum to get things rolling. We want to be successful quickly and prove the worth of what's happening. And sometimes we push the security out to later. And there's two times when Sysdig comes in. One, when people are planning, if they have the forethought to do that, and other times when we're now having security issues because we're in production. And how do we solve those as quickly as we can? So we did some look into our customer base to see what were kind of the failures or faults, I guess we could say, of what they were doing. One, we found that 52% of container images were failing their initial scan. So we've been talking a little bit about how you can spot vulnerabilities inside of images, known vulnerabilities. And when folks were scanning, at least on the initial side, there were a lot of things that we cannot push to production with this vulnerability in place. Usually, obviously, there's a known fix. You can implement that fix and off you go to the races. But what it tells us is that a lot of these things are not being addressed early in development. And some of it's because we're grabbing a container from a Docker Hub or something like this, and we're not thinking about it. Now, Red Hat has tried to solve that by having a hosting set of containers that are certified and do these initial scans kind of even before they're pushed out and made available to the public. The second statistic here, 21 containers running as root per node. Now again, this comes kind of as a default setting when you go and get a container image. It's really great that we can do things like go download or pull a MySQL container, but we should be careful about setting our own proper permissions. Otherwise, if you're running as root, obviously there's a chance for escalation and breakout and so on. So what does it tell us? That best practices for detecting, first of all, for setting things up, and then once it's in production, for detecting that this is actually the case and preventing 21 containers from running as root are not in place. And we'll show you how Sysdig can help with that. And then look, one of the key challenges is that over half of containers across our customers are doing things like spinning up, doing a job, and then spinning down or basically shutting off. And so if you cannot see in real time kind of what's happening in the environment, things and anomalies and unwanted behavior and breaches may go undetected. So how do you get there? How do you see what's happening? And we'll talk about how some things that Sysdig has done and on the open source side with Falco, as well as our commercial products, can help you with that. All right, so let's push on. So why is this an issue? Why is Kubernetes security hard? And I don't know many of you if you've experienced this yet, but it can be hard to see activity inside of containers. And what that means is, as a black box, a bit opaque, these containers are meant to isolate and run anywhere and be very effective at that. But if we can't see actually what's happening, with processes, with files and networking and so on, that can be a challenge to secure. And so how do we solve that problem? It's easy to end up with image misconfigurations. just the case in point of this thing is running as root. I didn't think about changing that before I went and pushed this out. So, how do you spot those things and make sure that's not happening? And then look, because they're coming and going all the time, right? These containers can sometimes be a little bit tricky to secure. So that's what makes security in this new world, this cloud native world, so hard, right? Common challenges that happen is we kicked off our project, we used the tooling that we've been using for some time, and we're suddenly finding that maybe it can see this container that has an ID and is running, but it doesn't understand what's happening in that container. It doesn't understand that it belongs to this OpenShift project or this Kubernetes namespace, right? And so how do we get there, right? The other thing that we have seen, and this has shifted a little bit with virtualization, but now is shifting even more into that culture thing we talked about, is that network guys have their tool, and we've got a operations tool, and we've got a security tool, and everyone's looking at their own thing. And sometimes it's hard to bring all that together to spot issues, especially in these new modern environments. And that makes it, essentially not very DevOps friendly. What you want to have is the ability to kind of see and collaborate and interoperate in a context of pushing code very fast every day, containers that start and stop, and so on. So what does that mean? You really should be thinking about cloud native tooling, much of which, there are things, again, built in to what Red Hat is doing, and then there are the things that we'll look at with Sysdig, unifying a view into operations and security, understanding context with containers, and understanding, hey, the issue is happening here in this app that may be running across 10 nodes, as opposed to I only see that this host is having a problem. How does that fit in? You really want to get that context, that sort of pinpointing that's more cloud native focused. And you want that to be embedded into your workflows, in the sense that, I have this DevOps team and I have this flow of things that I do throughout the life cycle, and we're able to actually use a solution that helps us along that way, along that path. Here's that path, effectively thinking about that. When we think about embedding security across a DevOps workflow, just as Dave started pointing out, and I will do as well, is that it really should start all the way back at the beginning. You hear this term shift left, and like other terms in our industry, sometimes overused, but it really means don't wait to the end. Let's think about security from the beginning. And if we can do that, developers are thinking about and checking and fixing and putting the right packages in that have all of the best chance of not having vulnerabilities. That's what we want to do. We want to check through the CI/CD pipeline. We want to be able to stage things and understand what it's going to behave like, and maybe simulate what will happen from a security perspective before we push into production. But look, we're going to get there with our containers into production. And so how do we look and monitor for things that, again, are anomalies, unusual behavior, or worse, right? And so there are some things that we can do there to make it effective, and then be able to respond effectively. And monitoring comes into play. We have Prometheus here. Prometheus has become the de facto standard, shipped by Red Hat, embraced by Sysdig. And so sometimes what you'll find is that I've seen a performance issue at the outset that underlying is actually a security breach of some sort. How can I marry those two things together? And again, singing from the same hymn book, so to speak, so that everyone understands that what's happening, whether it's performance, health, security, compliance, and whatnot, right? And a lot of times the security teams are driving these requirements, and we're going to show you how we can help map policies and automation to those security requirements. So real quick, who is Sysdig? We are effectively delivering tools that are all about secure DevOps. And you'll see on the left here, Sysdig Secure, Sysdig Monitor. Those are the tool sets that we bring to you, single agent, single backend, built on an open source foundation. And what that means is that we actually started as open source. So what I jokingly call lowercase Sysdig. We started Falco, which is a runtime security project that was donated to the CNCF, so sort of the same place that Kubernetes is, that Prometheus is, and so on. And so that is alive and well, and a lot of community contribution. Prometheus on the monitoring side, Anchor on the image scanning side. So We pride ourselves in that. We think it's a good way to kind of keep up with exactly what needs to be done today with all the changes that are happening with containers and Kubernetes. Our goal is to give you deep visibility to run confidently, so I can see what's happening in a container. I can take action, I can block, I can do all sorts of things, right? Including doing forensics for containers. And then at the end of the day, we're making it very easy for you to get started. So scaling, one of the things that OpenShift is very, very good at is scaling, and one of the things that Sysdig is very, very good at is scaling. And some of that is just because you can easily get started, let us handle the back end, and away you go. And we've done a lot of DevOps integrations. Dave pointed to one of those, which is implementing our ability to deliver security across a cluster or clusters and clouds, and integrating that into Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management as an example, right? And so partnering in order those DevOps integrations are there. So really what we do is secure containers, Kubernetes, and cloud services, kind of full stop. So what can you do with Sysdig? Quickly, we've been talking a bit about this. You can secure the build pipeline. So we're thinking about things like Jenkins, Tecton, cloud tools have some of their own things, the folks at AWS and Google and Azure. Being able to do things like inspect images as they're floating through there. Let's not wait until it gets to production to figure out there was an issue, and let's fix it and move on, right? To be able to detect and respond to threats. And again, it's trickier in a container environment, and we can help you do that. Compliance is really a big driver these days. There's so many standards, depending on who you are. And we're going to look at some customers in a minute that fit into that mode. And then, monitoring, right? Understanding, again, from a performance level, what's happening. Let's go to our third polling question at this point and get a flavor of, I believe we're going to ask a little bit about use cases, right?
Let's push that out now. Sorry, here we go. Okay, what use cases are you looking to immediately address for container/Kubernetes security? You can check all that apply. So you can select from one or more of the following: image scanning, compliance, runtime threat detection, Kubernetes network security, or incident response. Go ahead and make your selection. And one final reminder to you guys that we are hopefully going to have a few minutes for question and answer period near the end of today's webinar. So you can go ahead and submit questions at any time during the webinar, and we will try to get to as many as we can. Also, another quick reminder that we are going to be doing that drawing at the end of today's webinar for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So you got to be in it to win it, so stick around, and hopefully you will be one of the 4 lucky winners. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close out this poll here in about 10 seconds, and then we'll take a look at the results, and then you guys can start. Do we have a demo, guys?
We do, and I'll try and keep it quick.
Excellent. Well, I'm always excited about the demos. So believe me, I could do an entire webinar just on a demo and I'd be happy. So, but let's go ahead and close out the poll, and we'll take a look at the results here. All right. Looks like the majority of folks are looking for Kubernetes network security, but compliance, that's really interesting. Compliance is second. So what do you guys think?
Well, yeah, interesting. I think they go hand in hand, but yeah, compliance is obviously big, right? You can't do compliance without security. So I'm glad that both of those are the big chunks,
Mm-hmm.
Image scanning fits into both of those. Threat detection fits into both of those. Incident response, a little bit separate, but still important, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that none of these are, 5% or less, right? I think they're all important. So it's good to see more so an equal, importance to all of these, right?
Excellent. All right, I'll go ahead and hide the results and you guys can get back to it.
Great. All right, so the next section, I wanted to tell the story about 3 customers who've been doing this, right, and different problems that they solved. And I'll move through this quickly so we can definitely get to the demo portion. Let's take a look at our first one, right? So this is Ford, and I know that Dave and I are very proud of what we've done here together, Red Hat and Sysdig. they were rolling out applications kind of, they'd been doing containers, but more from a stateless standpoint with another solution. And what stateless means is that the data, containers started and stopped, but there was no important data kind of involved in that environment for the most part, right? And so they were moving to stateful apps. They knew that security should be job one, right? And they really wanted to be able to effectively manage this from day one. Remember, I said sometimes people get started early and put the right things in place, and sometimes they wait till there's a problem and then solve it. These guys kind of took everyone in the business, platform engineering, app developers, service owners, security teams, and said, what do you think is necessary? What do you think is important? Define their requirements. Those requirements clearly said, the platform needs to be built for security from day one, thus OpenShift, right? So that everything is kind of security thought about at every level, what Dave went through on the OpenShift slide. And that they also needed tooling to give them that visibility into containers, the security with containers across that life cycle that we looked at, everything from CI/CD through being able to audit and prove compliance. Automobile manufacturers are subject to a lot of compliance requirements, right? Security requirements. So they were happy to get all of this in place. Boom, rolled into production, and before they knew it, teams across the business were trying to get on board, right? And wanting to be part of this new platform. Why? Because when it comes to provisioning, they were able to do what used to take them 3 months to do that in 3 minutes. And that's comparing kind of your classic provision servers and some storage and get the networking set up and all of that, subject to a lot of different folks, to sort of push button, easy automated through the magic of orchestration and OpenShift. Fewer staff required. In fact, when they got started, they kind of pulled some hardware that was due to be retired. Just a couple guys built the cluster and away they were going, and felt really confident in everything. And now they like to use the platform to experiment more. And the visibility they get from Sysdig tells them that, when something might be amiss, and so they kind of can roll back, right? And so they feel like they have now the freedom to experiment more, worry less. So that's always important when you've got a company that's trying to innovate and stay ahead of the game. Here's one of our champions there. And at the end of the day, kind of here's what he's saying. And this kind of, again, speaks to what Dave said. Having the right set of partners situates us for success. The next one here, a major credit card company, I can think of 4, it's one of them. For them, again, also, once again, using OpenShift, of course, but now using it in the AWS cloud, right? And so they had, as a credit card company, compliance mandates. And one of the things that they were having a hard time detecting non-OS image vulnerabilities. So one of the things that Sysdig does well is not just look at packages, OS packages and the vulnerabilities, but third parties, libraries, secrets, those kind of things. And so they were just having that visibility challenge that I talked about. And so for them, why did they pick Sysdig to layer into the Red Hat platform? Really about getting comprehensive image scanning, the ability to spot things before they move into production, the policy-based runtime threat detection, which is what I'm going to focus on in the demo, was important to them. So we're in production, we can spot things and stop them and be able to show what happened when something does happen, whether that's just a mistake or a known kind of bad situation, right? So they're now able to confidently pass their security audits, remove that as a blocker, right? Sometimes teams get slowed down because of security issues. And this kind of means they can run a little bit faster and be confident in doing that once again, and they're able to efficiently respond. The last one is very similar, not a credit card company, but a payment processing provider. So imagine doing business with vendors who rely on you to process all of the credit card transactions that are part and parcel to earning money in that business, right? PCI becomes very critical. And what I'm going to do is show you in the product in Sysdig how we can give you policies out of the box to help you address that. Look, similar story. At the end of the day, they were having trouble effectively auditing to prove PCI compliance. So with this compliance mandate, there's usually someone waiting to have your certification that the controls are in place, that it's done well, and so on, right? And so how they solve that challenge is by getting the right capabilities out of the Red Hat OpenShift platform along with Sysdig, and some of the capabilities I'll show you in just a second. And so now, they're able to have much better communication between DevOps, security teams, and compliance for that matter, and they're achieving that PCI compliance at the same time, reducing overhead. So automation and visibility becomes the name of the game for a lot of this compliance capability. All right, let's jump into the demo. So I'm going to hit escape real quick, check my watch. I'm going to promise to do this in just a few minutes. So just wanted to give you a flavor of Sysdig, right? Sysdig has Sysdig Secure, Sysdig Monitor. What we've done, let me close this out. We're going to stay in Sysdig Secure, which is where we are right now. We've kind of give you this overview. The overview is trying to tell you what are we finding right now in the environment with regard to, you know, pre-production, CI/CD pipeline, registries, and so on with scanning, right? But we're also able to kind of do things like Dave said, show you kind of a benchmark, measurements, and so on. This is kind of overview that lets you dive deeper. You know, image scanning is a part of what we can help you with. And when we're thinking about things like compliance, I'm just going to show you these policies real quick. You know, we've put some out of the box here, but also giving the ability to build your own. Let's look at, like, for instance, the NIST one, and kind of give you an idea of rules that you can set up and do things like just warn me, or actually stop a build if you're experiencing something that you really can't have move any further. And so that becomes an effective way to do it. And we're looking at things like vulnerabilities, different packages, and third-party libraries, as I mentioned, checking around secrets to make sure that your, you know, access keys for your clouds are not, you know, or whatever it might be, are not inside that container and exposing you, and so on, right? And so we give you these so that you can set up and decide how and where you want to apply them, and then, of course, get your scan results pre-production. But also, one of the important things here is that when I'm running containers in production, you know, today I felt really confident, and tomorrow a new CVE shows up. How do I know that I'm now subject to that issue and probably should roll a new container and push it out in its place? So let's say I'm the Java app owner. So we're looking at now the awareness, without having to go rescan images, the awareness that in this Java app, guess what? As of today, right, all of the images have known CVEs that weren't available yesterday or the day before, right? And so now we can go and click through and kind of get an idea of what that is, and kind of what, you know, click through and find out, is there a fix available, get this over to the right teams. One of the cool things here, if I move backwards, is that, let me go back and do it this way. Remember I talked about context? Right now we're looking at the context of namespaces, right, which is typically, you know, I'm the Java team and I own this namespace and what's running there. But we can look at it from a number of different slices and perspectives, right? And this helps you to narrow down who's the right team that needs to address this vulnerability. All right, so let's now look for the kind of the second part here, kind of runtime. So we're pushed into production, and this is very, very unique to Sysdig, and this is the part that is very fully integrated with the Rackham solution that Dave talked about. We've got these runtime policies that you can set up. And look, just look at some of the words here. And these are, you could turn them on or off, but it's like we're looking for things that are suspicious, or privileged pods like we talked about, or someone's running commands in a container, someone's touching information that's sensitive. And so you can implement these things either by turning on or off these rule sets, but you can also you know, build your own. We have this rules library, and just to show you, you know, again, if you're subject to certain particular, like if you're subject to NIST 853, you can click on this and kind of get an idea of what are the things that I should be implementing and looking for during runtime. And these can all be built into a policy that can be turned on and watch for, again, that bad stuff. And I'm going to pick one here. Let's pick terminal shell in a container. And this kind of shows you under the hood what we're looking for. And when you have these set up, I can scope it down very finely to a specific namespace. Remember I said I'm the Java team. I can do that, or put it against my entire environment. And what can you do? You can kill, stop, or pause containers, or do nothing, right? And get a notification. And you can do something that is to take a capture file. Capture files are very unique to Sysdig in that, remember I said containers coming and going very quickly. Something bad happens, what we can have is a recording of the before, during, and after an event. That gives you the ability to go back in, recreate what did someone do, who did it, what commands did they run, what files did they touch. Very important for compliance and simply for determining who did what, right? So now let's say I am monitoring as maybe I'm the network or I'm the security operations center, and I'm able to see like, okay, someone has triggered this rule of accessing a crypto mining network, right? And so at the end of the day, what we're able to do is show you what's been triggered, kind of show you the rules and things that it's violating. And I'm able to kind of give you the scoping of where it's happening down to even the container and process level, right? So what does this do? This gives us, again, the ability to take into account the very specific Kubernetes context and to be able to pinpoint and spot that, right? So one of the things that you can do is go in and look at an activity audit. And again, I love my Java team. We're going to go in and see, has there been any activity? Nope, I'm looking pretty good. Nothing's been triggered here, but maybe I am the, let's see, let's pick one let's just look at this one here, right? So what we're able to show you is things like what files have been touched, what commands were being ran. I can zoom in on something, right? And be able to get an activity audit. And this becomes very, very critical for compliance, right? And this is one way to view things. The other way would be to do, I don't have any capture files created right now, but you can go into these capture files, which is at a fine grained level, very, very deep information, right? That will help you understand what's behind each of these things. This gives you some idea, right? So I'm looking at a command, what was happening, where it was running, the host it was happening on, and so on, right? On a file level, similarly, right? So our goal is to help you across the life cycle, whether it's image scanning. Dave talked about compliance, and we have the ability to auto run some of these CIS benchmarks and be able to show you those kind of things, right? So that you know green, yellow, red, how am I doing? We're able to set up policies to look at the running environment. We're able to show you events that are triggered by those policies and be able to audit what's been happening. So we'll leave it at that for now. Hopefully that gave you a quick taste of what's possible when you're pairing Sysdig with the Red Hat platform. And we invite you, and I think we'll have here after this slide some resources for you. I don't know, Dave, you want to wrap up the Red Hat side on here?
Yeah, I mean, that was excellent. Thanks, Eric. I always love to see Sysdig in action and how it complements Red Hat, like what's shown in this slide, right? So the key things with Red Hat is, you know, our vision around DevSecOps and as being the platform vendor and having these ecosystem partners like Sysdig, we can help you to get started quickly, especially around security and securing not just one cluster, but all your clusters as well. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely, and for us, you know, I think the money one here is deep visibility to run apps confidently and help you with that. So I think if you think of nothing else that Sysdig can help with, it is that, right? Cool. So let's pause on this. These are some resources for you, and I think now we'll try and address some of the questions that came in. I know we're running to the edge on time here, but let's see what we can do.
Well, that's okay. We do have about 4 or 5 minutes for questions, not a ton of time, but enough to dive into 1 or 2, maybe 3 of them. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's see. Okay, Dave, I think this one is for you. You mentioned IAM and RBAC, role-based access control, as security features for OpenShift, but can I also find those in Kubernetes?
Yes, you can. Very good point. So IAM and RBAC, those are the identity access management, role-based access control. You can find those in Kubernetes. I think the key point, I probably forgot to mention this, is that OpenShift, for example, will have RBAC turned on by default. So you don't have to go into the Kubernetes API, and I think you have to add some switch when you're running kube to turn on RBAC. That's just one of the features that OpenShift brings, is that sort of secure by design mentality where we have that on by default.
Okay. All right, great. Next question here. How does Sysdig handle compliance, and what standards do you support?
Yeah, you looked at that. Some of the things we're doing out of the box, both at sort of that front end vulnerability checking standpoint, and you saw I had something there out of the box for PCI. We had something there for NIST. you can apply those scans and the things that you can look for to other standards as well, like HIPAA, like SOC 2 compliance, right? And so while some of the things we've codified out of the box, so to speak, right, you can kind of build your own. And when you think about that runtime security, we've also given you sort of the insights into how do those apply to different standards. What does it mean? But at the end, if you, like HIPAA, you got a standard that says, you need to protect sensitive data, right? So let's implement the rule that says, sensitive file infiltration, right? And make sure that we're looking and policing that as best we can. So a number of different ways to do that. And sometimes compliance is also, it's about the controls, it's about the testing of this on a regular basis, and then it's about the reporting. So activity audits, capture files, those all come into the proving, whether it's to the business or to auditors themselves, we've got this under control, we're doing this the correct way, it's our best effort.
Okay. All right, great. I think we have time for one more quick question, then we'll wrap it up. What should I do if I find a vulnerability discrepancy with my scanning tool?
Yeah, so I'll take this. Currently, what we would like you to do, let's focus on if you're scanning a container that has Red Hat packages or is a container from Red Hat. If that occurs and you see that the report says there's a vulnerability, for example, and Red Hat says there isn't, there's a couple of things you can do. One, I would say right now you would engage both parties. So engage Sysdig, for example, engage Red Hat. In the future, after certification, we're going to have a formal support structure that you can just engage Red Hat and we'll work with Sysdig in that manner. But there are some things you can do as triage and evidence if you're willing. If not, Red Hat would be happy to do that for you. But you could look up different RPM commands to make sure that that file in question is part of an RPM. And then you could sort of traverse back to the Red Hat sites to see if that RPM has been fixed or what Red Hat says about that CVE. And so I would say, those two things, but Red Hat and our partners are here to sort of help you through those discrepancies until certification happens, which hopefully will be soon next year.
Excellent. All right. Well, we are about 3 minutes to the top of the hour, so unfortunately that's all the time we have for questions. I know we got a lot of questions in, and I apologize if we didn't get to your question, but please know that both Sysdig and Red Hat will be getting a copy of all the questions that came in, and I'm sure that Eric, Dave, or somebody from their organizations will be more than happy to follow up with you offline to get your question answered. Also, a quick reminder that today's event has been recorded, so if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. As I've said twice before already, we are going to be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand following today's webinar. The webinar is also going to be on the DevOps.com website, so you can go look for it there as well. Just go to DevOps.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, before we shut things down, I do have a drawing to do for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Our first winner today is Eric, drum roll, please. I was hoping on the drum set behind you, but that's okay.
It would take too much effort.
All right, first winner today is George C. Congratulations, George. Our second winner today is Heidi B. Congratulations, Heidi. Third winner today is Robin M. Congratulations, Robin. And our fourth and final winner today is Chris P. Congratulations, Chris. We will be following up with all 4 of you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see anything there, please check your spam folder. Eric and Dave, as always, it was a total pleasure. Thank you so much for a great webinar, so much information. And you know me, I love the demos, so keep them coming.
Gotcha.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.